The Lumad of Mindanao, an indigenous people living in the southern Philippines, have long struggled to protect their ancestral lands, defend their cultural identities, and create better livelihoods. With the arrival of Spanish colonizers in the 16th century, the traditional way of life was disrupted and their territories were taken away. In recent decades, they have faced increasing threats from the Philippine government, multinational corporations, and armed groups. Despite these challenges, the Lumad have fought back and achieved important victories in their struggle for indigenous rights. The Lumad are a diverse group of approximately 18 indigenous peoples scattered across Mindanao, the second largest island in the Philippines. They are mostly hunter-gatherers and subsistence farmers who have lived in the area for centuries. The traditional lands, however, have been increasingly threatened by the Philippine government, multinational corporations, and armed groups. The government has encouraged the expansion of large-scale mining and logging projects that have led to the displacement of indigenous communities, as well as environmental degradation. Armed groups, such as the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, MILF, and the New People's Army, NPA, have also targeted Lumad communities, leading to violence and human rights abuses. In response to these threats, the Lumad of Mindanao have united to defend their rights and protect their ancestral lands. In 2013, the Lumad formed the Manilikbayan, a series of marches and protests that called for the recognition of indigenous rights and the protection of Lumad lands. The march was supported by a wide coalition of indigenous groups, human rights organizations, and civil society groups. The Manilikbayan was successful in bringing attention to the Lumad's plight and pressuring the government to take action. In 2014, the Philippine government responded by passing the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, IPRA, which recognizes the rights of indigenous peoples to their ancestral lands, self-determination, and cultural identity. The IPRA also established the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, NCIP, which is responsible for protecting the rights of indigenous peoples and resolving disputes between indigenous communities and corporations. In addition to the IPRA, the Lumad have achieved several other victories in recent years. In 2019, the Supreme Court of the Philippines ruled in favor of the Lumad's right to their ancestral lands, overturning a previous decision that had allowed a mining company to operate on indigenous lands. This was a major victory for the Lumad and other indigenous peoples in the Philippines. Despite these victories, the Lumad of Mindanao continue to face threats to their rights and livelihoods. They are still struggling to protect their ancestral lands from encroachment by corporations and armed groups, and they are still fighting for full recognition of their rights under the IPRA. However, the Lumad have shown that they are a powerful force for change and that they will continue to fight for their rights.